Welcome back to Food for Thought Leadership. I got my good friend Barry Thomas from Kantar with us today, and we're going to be talking about agentic AI, which I know everybody has been talking about, but I think it's going to be great to do a deep dive here. And I think to start us off, Barry, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your career history, some of the work you do with Kantar, just so the audience can be a little bit more familiar with you before we jump into today's conversation.
Sure, Chris. I'll just keep it short. Nearly 40 years in retail CPG, the restaurant industry. Background is Walmart, Pfizer, retired from the Coca-Cola company 3 years ago. And my last few years there, I was working in the global center. I'd started sort of a future of commerce practice, which was of high interest to all the customers we worked with. And so as I retired there, I said, you know what, let's do that over at Kantar, great partner of ours. So I'm doing that same work here, global lens on commerce, marketing, and certainly, Chris, as you know, everybody wants to talk about, AI, agentic shopping in its early days, but it is having an impact. So just glad to be here.
I think maybe that's the best way to start this conversation, Barry. People are starting to get more familiar with AI. I think they're more familiar with the generative side at this point because that's been more consumer facing, but agentic AI has been making headlines so far in 2025 as we're coming up on 2026. So maybe we could start off with just a basic definition. When you talk to clients about agentic AI, how do you describe it?
It's early days, already having an impact. I think you just have to go back to the word, where this started from, agency. So these agents can, essentially act on your behalf. They're using data, rules, certainly learning, and obviously it's moving into commerce today. And there's lots of developments almost every day happening. Here we're reporting on it at Kantar and helping clients here. It certainly impacts retail, but as importantly, branding and marketing. And I was just at the big Brand Week conference down here in Atlanta last week. And certainly the narrative around my brand needs to be AI visible in the context of the agentic web and agentic commerce was way at the top. So it's a fun space and it's just so dynamic and moving quickly.
And I think maybe just to define it a little bit further, I think the best way is maybe to compare it against, generative AI. So when you talk about agentic AI, I think people probably think immediately just chatbots. I think that they are obviously a little bit stronger than that, but they are somewhat similar. So maybe we start off there as a starting point and maybe talk a little bit about how this agentic AI actually works.
Sure. I mean, if you're on, a platform like ChatGPT and you put in a query, generative AI is going to, produce really what you request, but agentic AI is going to take action. It can do the deep research across your query. And importantly, it will produce a product card. You're not hearing a lot about that, but that's a really important concept because then essentially the models are really recommending specific products to you based on data rules and some of the governance of maybe your question. So brands just want to be a part of the answer that's being surfaced up by these models, and they're improving every day, and they're especially impacting discovery as we look at all the data. Not so much conversion yet for obvious reasons, but certainly discovery and considerations where we're seeing the biggest impact with let's just call it agentic AI and AI shopping. I do think if you want to talk about it a little broader, there's a lot more to this than just sort of that node. I'm kind of breaking this down in 5 parts. If you want, we can kind of go into that, but I would just cover it quickly.
Yeah, I think that might be worthwhile just to kind of take a look at it because I think, the rest of the conversation, we're going to dive a little bit deeper, but I think kind of setting the stage is important here. So let's talk about those 5 different kind of thoughts you have there.
Sure. It's kind of how we're talking to clients now, brands and CPGs, retailers, and some restaurants. Just quickly, there's certainly 5 areas, back up a little bit. Number one, we kind of lose sight of, these sort of AI powered shopping apps, and they're really educating the shopper in a way we've never seen before. Think of that Yuka app. If you don't have the Yuka app, YUKA, you want to download it. It's having a profound impact on the path to purchase. Nearly 80 million users, and it's the number 1 app on, the Apple, App Store. So just, it's really important. We kind of lose sight of that. Then you kind of move towards sort of, agentic, if you will. Secondly, would just be answer engines. Obviously, they're inspiring and helping, shoppers explore. We can think of Google AI mode there, for example. Then thirdly, I kind of think of this as basically intelligent discovery. Agentic browsers. Man, this is a big deal. Like ChatGPT's Atlas, and just the memory and the customization to really sort of your mental model is coming back in search. And we call this the agentic web. Man, it's kind of a big deal. Fourth is what I just call sort of conversational retail. And that's the AI retail assistants like with Walmart and Sparky and Amazon Rufus, they're playing a far bigger role in influencing the shopper, where maybe the sort of the traditional bar on the website just is a little less tangible, a little less relevant if I'm in the conversation there with, say, Rufus. And then lastly, we kind of get to where there's a lot of hype with instant checkout, and that's the ACP, Agentic Commerce Protocol, and with that Walmart big OpenAI announcement. Yes, that's kind of where we're getting to a bit of agentic commerce, but it's still early days. The basket is really one item per checkout. But you can see Walmart moving early to be a part of essentially what's becoming a marketplace. You got to remember ChatGPT, almost, not quite, but they're moving towards 1 billion, users. I want to say weekly users, certainly monthly users, and that's going to make them a marketplace. And obviously, they're kind of doing that now with Shopify, Etsy, et cetera.
Yeah, and to your point, right, Walmart did make a huge bet on this earlier this year, basically announcing that they're going to be using different types. I think it was 4 different types of agentic AI within their operations, some consumer facing, some supplier facing, some that are, specifically for employees. So it seems like there's like this new, I don't want to use web. That's probably the wrong term if we're talking about the internet here, right? But it does seem like they are starting to like connect in different ways, right? So I think we can talk about that a little bit further, but with Walmart, you mentioned Amazon. We don't need to name the types of brands or even by name, but when you take a look in your consultancy work, what kinds of companies are looking at this? Is it really just retailers? I know you mentioned food service earlier. I'm sure manufacturers can benefit from this. How do you see this playing out with different parts of the food industry? Is it something that it's kind of like a universal adoption, or is it going to be very customized depending on the needs of the business?
That's a really good question. Time will tell, but for sure, for more kind of routine purchases, you can see those moving to more of an agentic commerce sort of playbook, where much of that center store just becomes reordered, a bit like what you see with Amazon and subscriptions. Again, so early here, but that's kind of where we're getting a lot of nods from the traditional food and beverage players. But on the other extreme, when you have high-end purchases, it could be a boat, it could be a vacation, it could be, a new electronic device. These answer engines are playing a very big role in just helping educate and sort of really play a meaningful role with discovery, and then a bit to consideration. And then as you get closer to sort of, the conversion, generally the shopper will go back to a regular let's say Google site just to confirm details. But much of the search now is happening with these answer engines, let's say.
Yeah, and I think that's something we're seeing in general. Over the last couple of years, whenever I do a panel or, host a panel on AI, one of the questions I'd like to ask is, so who's using ChatGPT instead of Google, right? And over the last couple of years, I've seen those hands go from a minority to a majority. So I think it's interesting. I was actually talking to a couple of friends over the weekend, just growing up in the internet era, getting to see the change, right? I feel like that was a foundational change for the world. And I feel like, to your point, we are at the start of another foundational change when it comes to how people interact digitally and these agentic agents. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit, later about how consumers are interacting with them. But I do feel like this is going to be a major, opportunity for a lot of food companies. And I think what we could do now too is maybe just dive a little bit deeper into agentic checkout. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but how does this specialized, agentic AI help operators? How is this helping food companies right now specifically?
Again, I think you just want to be studying this because it's, such a small portion of your business. But you can, take the differences between Walmart and Amazon. Walmart is seeing this as, look, this is another way the shopper can explore, conduct shopping in a more convenient manner, let's say, and you just kind of want to be a part of that marketplace. So they're, leaning in, want to partner. Here's Amazon on the other side saying, you know what, I don't really want perplexity and these crawlers, agents taking any information back to the model because that could impact my retail media. That's a really important point for Amazon. And then just all that data, the reviews data, et cetera. So Amazon taking an exact opposite approach. Please do not come here. You're banned, as a crawler agent. So 2 completely different paths, which I think are really interesting. For the merchant, which you still like if you're Walmart, let's say, or Shopify or Etsy, you're still the merchant of record. So I like that. everyone knows that it's coming from me, and I do have some data collection. What you don't necessarily love is now here's OpenAI with more data, which they can monetize. Maybe OpenAI and these other, platforms certainly will move into media. No one's going to disagree with that. When that's coming, we're not sure. So, you do get disintermediated a bit, but with, sort of a one item, one basket capability right now, it's not too intrusive. I just think you want to be learning here. If you're an FMCG brand, especially a high frequency, brand, you want to be a part of what's taking place here, just to be building capabilities, having the insight, and learning how to, interact in this new agentic commerce, path that we're on.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on one of my 2026 things to watch, which is retail media networks, right? I feel like they've been building a lot of momentum the last couple of years. And then all of a sudden this roadblock comes in with, agentic AI and even just generative AI, where people are searching, and I believe that OpenAI, to your point, has made a couple of partnerships for ChatGPT to be able to, order products directly from the platform, right? So to your point, I would imagine they will get into retail media at some point, but it's definitely something to watch for next year, and probably worth its own episode. So maybe we'll talk about that in 2026, Barry. But to keep it going here, I think one of the things we could talk about maybe is just pros and cons of utilizing this technology on the business side. I think some of the major pros that I see, at least, is that this does make the shopping experience, theoretically easier for the consumer. I think, right, we're going to have an adoption curve, and it's going to take a little bit for consumers to really get totally okay with this. But to your point about, Amazon subscriptions, we're seeing that people are okay with some of these things being automated. They want to get some of these, things off their plate. They want to be able to focus on other areas of their life that they're more interested in, and finding a way to make it repeatable and easy is obviously something that's going to be a pro for, I think, retailers, and, probably leads to more sales because people are just on autopilot. So I think that's a major pro I see for development there. But I'm wondering if you see any other pros that companies will be able to take advantage of, and then maybe some of the challenges as well, trying to get this up and running. I would imagine there is a ton of work that has to go into making sure that these actually work, and not just, especially considering it's so many different types of AI at this point that are starting to shake hands, right? You have all these different companies that are involved. So I would imagine there's a bunch on both sides, the pros and cons. So I was hoping you could share a little bit on that.
Sure. I think, backing up for a moment, think about those 5 ways I described that AI is impacting the shopper path to purchase. I just think as a retailer and a CPG, wow, you just really want to understand that. And, given that, you kind of have to move to a new form of marketing in part. And so what we're seeing the legacy companies do is move to something called, I call it metadata marketing, where, wow, my packaging really is my data now. That's kind of a different concept, right? And so in the context of the agentic web and driving AI visibility, I'm moving to metadata marketing, and I'm really dialing up all my data points and kind of really aiming for premium positioning within this new sort of citation ecosystem, right? And that's what we have. Could be Reddit for your brand. It could be lots of different sort of new almost earned media. That's kind of a key concept here. Earned media. That's really in large part what's being, searched here, reviews and, authoritative content. So I do have to change my marketing. Secondly, what we just saw from the new IAB study, which is really strong on all this, is new to brand. Whoa, like these answer engines are surfacing new brands that traditionally that shopper would not see. So I do think, and I know that challenger brands are coming up more than they would in a traditional Google search, which would be dominated by legacy brands, multi-million-dollar budgets. Whereas what's happening with these answer engines, that's more prone to, a data and citation ecosystem that isn't necessarily paid as much as would be with traditional SEO. And so we are seeing challenger brands show up more in new ways than they have in the past. So I think for, a legacy FMCG brand, you just want to be aware of that. And ultimately, you have to understand your metrics. This is sort of a new world. So what are my metrics? What do I actually measure, Chris? Well, maybe you're measuring like share of model. And over here, it's really strong. And over here, it's a train wreck. And then you're kind of measuring, share of prompts. There's 4 to 5 or 6 different types of prompts generally that are happening in these conversations. And you just want to be able to measure that. So it's an entirely sort of new world in many ways. And I do think, marketing to consumers becomes a bit more like marketing, almost like to a software system. because data is just such your rich, potent asset. So I don't know if that's a little strange, but that's kind of where we are.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think, metadata marketing is interesting. Earlier this year, we did a webinar with GS1 about Sunrise and the new 2D barcodes that they're putting out there. And I think the biggest takeaway I had from that, well, I guess two. Number one, consumers want to know what's in your food product. And I think that goes back to your Yuka app kind of recommendation there, right? People are utilizing this because they are very concerned. So I think that part's very interesting, but also just the fact, to your point, you're not really marketing to search engine optimization anymore. It's, I've heard it used agentic optimization. There's different terms for it right now, and I think the industry will eventually get there. But to your point, you're really focusing on trying to get these agentic chat bots essentially to like pick up on your search terms so that they can give it to the consumer. So I think that is kind of a double-edged sword. To your point, challenger brands are doing real well here. I guess that skews that way because challenger brands typically are the ones that are on the forefront of these consumer trends, right? They're nimble enough to try to do that. So it makes a lot of sense. But I think that is definitely a competitive threat for a lot of the major brands out there. They were already facing private label, which is taking share. And now you have challenger brands that are saying, hey, consumers are willing to pay, increased price for this product because there is a lot of health benefits or some kind of functional attribute, whatever it is that consumers are looking for in the current moment. And I think if companies are not paying attention to this, to your point, we're right at the beginning of it, but there is a lot of white space for people that are going to say, hey, we want to bring this into our company right now because this is where it seems to be going. So very, very interesting. And to your point, a lot left to be seen, but I think it does bring up a fundamental question, and that's how are consumers going to react to this? I think in general, consumers, our technology, well, they're open to new technologies, but I have found in the food industry specifically, companies and consumers sometimes are kind of reticent to try new tech. I think that's a fair way to put it, maybe a little softer than what I've seen in my history here. But, do you think consumers are going to be able to build the same kind of relationship with brands when you kind of remove that human element and they're kind of relying? Because I see a future where you talk to your AI assistant who you may purchase, specifically, and you say, hey, this is what I want to eat this week. And it does everything for you. And it's making its choice, it's making choices for you. And obviously you can, give input, right? It's not like it's just going to decide what you're doing immediately, but it does kind of remove that human element. And one of the things we've seen consistently this year is that people are looking for authentic, real experiences. I just did a podcast with Robin Carter at Jump Road Innovation. And that's one of the major things they're seeing with consumers right now is like, we want a real authentic experience in a restaurant. We want real and authentic, foods from the grocery store. So for me, it's kind of hard to take these two things and balance them out, right? You have this one consumer need for authenticity, but also consumer need for convenience. And they seem to be, at a crossheads, right? I don't see how they work together. So I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that, because I feel like that's going to be one of the major challenges for food brands is maintaining that authenticity while also, slowly removing the human element from a lot of the transactions.
You're hitting on a lot there, and I agree with everything you're saying. Just a couple of points I'd say is, look, ultimately, this is saving the consumer a lot of time. This is convenience. I'm not having to spend 17 minutes on Google or Yahoo or whatever, running this analysis, comparing all these products. So because of that, this is why the adoption is so high. Secondly, the adoption is just extremely high with younger consumers. Whoa, every study you look at, if you're younger millennial or Gen Z, you're kind of down the path here. Third, it's going to impact holiday shopping. So just think, at least 1/3 of all holiday online transactions are being influenced with these models, especially for products that are over $100. When I hear you talk about authenticity, number 4 there is just, you're so right. And that's why your reviews matter so much. I think Bazaar Voice is doing a wonderful job here. Somebody we work with helping brands, more than ever, that UGC data, gosh, it's really coming up, especially within those AI shopping assistants like Rufus with Amazon or Walmart and Sparky. That's way up on the algorithm weighting. So authenticity is really important, and the reviews are helping, drive so much of that. So I do think also, as a retailer, what I'm kind of seeing and hearing, and there's some data on this early, one class of trade that's really going to win here for food and beverages, there's no question about this, is, the club channel, because transparency in the world we're talking about goes way up. It doesn't go down, it just goes up. And so if you have the lowest price on, known important brands and products, you win. And generally, who has the best supply chain to your zip code? Well, typically clubs. and they're going to be surfacing more of their brands, than other retailers or classes of trade, let's say. So, your pricing and your availability as well, and all those data points around your products are just going to be more transparent to the shopper. And I think Costco, Sam's Clubs, they're going to be big winners here.
Interesting. Something to definitely keep an eye on as we move into the new year here. I guess kind of like the second side of that coin is, do you think we're going to see a subset of consumers that just absolutely say, no way, and completely stay away from this? Or do you think this is just going to become table stakes? Is this something that people are going to be like, I can't escape it. I have to be involved with this agentic AI? Because I find even, sometimes customer support stuff, we're seeing companies obviously laying people off and they're turning to AI. So, do you think you'll see a subset of customers, maybe retailers that say, hey, I'm not doing this specifically to try to get this cache of customers? Or do you think this is going to be so big that, you'll have to do it in some way or the other?
Like short term and long term. So short term, you're right. There's some retailers that are kind of, they're playing a bit of a role here, but they're really focused on and care most about their physical, shopping experience. Think Trader Joe's. You're not going to see a lot of just AI breakthrough customer experiences happening there. They're more about, hey, come to our store, experience the store, everything in it. Our associates are knowledgeable. That's their real differentiation. And if you think longer term, as we move to a place, say 10 years out, where, humans are going to be much more connected to technology in very different ways, almost like a new species. You could argue that, Elon Musk talks about this, with microprocessing chips and brains and things. You're going to see a segment of society who wants nothing to do with all that. Now, this is a bit away from shopping, but there's no question that there'll be a segment of society that will opt out of so much of this technology for mental health reasons, quality of life, values, and so much more. So absolutely. Of course, that will impact shopping as well.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting to your point. I'm like on the fence myself. Sometimes I see this new technology. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And it's like something that could make my life better. And then part of me is like, but do I really want, an AI to have such access to my life, right? And it's like, this is more of a philosophy question at this point than really retail, but I think it's something that retailers and consumers are going to have to grapple with, is how much of my personal data and my personal life am I willing to share for that convenience? And I guess that's always been kind of a matrix with value too, right? Cost and convenience, and also what you're giving up for part of that. But I feel like we are at a reckoning point because of that, and a lot of companies have to make a choice. I would imagine that we're going to see more adoption than not. And I think, at the end of the day, the people that are saying no, for religious reasons or value reasons or privacy reasons will probably be the minority because of the convenience aspect here. But to your point, I think Trader Joe's is a great example, right? Like really diving in on the human side and maintaining their core brand and values. So definitely something that'll be interesting to watch as we move forward here. And on that point, looking to 2026, I already shared what I think is going to be one of the major things to keep an eye on, at least on the retail side with the retail media networks. Anything we haven't talked today about with AI that you're keeping an eye on for 2026? Something that might be, coming down the pike that we should be basically aware of and ready for?
Sure, there's so much, but just a few things. One, just in the context of your own upskilling and competitive advantage, I just think for all of us, you have to have a learning plan. If you really don't have a learning plan where you're focused on, building skills here, and credentialed skills, by the way, so like the badge shows up on LinkedIn because you took the course and actually, passed whatever that was. I think increasingly becomes important to employers as we're working with, brands that are hiring, et cetera. They're stating overtly credentialed data and AI skills are way at the top. Hey, it's great you got the MBA from et cetera, but I'm looking at your recent, like where are you as a sort of a learner? Because in this new world, the fastest learners win. No question about it. So I just think point one is upskilling. Have your own upskilling plan. As a part of that, be within a learning circle is kind of what I call them. Who are, 5 or 6 people that are sort of your learning circle within this specific area. And you may connect individually. You may connect all together quarterly. Companies are doing this, by the way, and it's sort of a formalized accelerated knowledge plan. And it does have kind of real benefits. I just think that needs to be front and center with everything we're talking about. Where am I, improving my competencies in this world? Secondly, just personally, I just think what's going to happen with Meta is going to be really interesting. They may actually produce, we'll see, the most profound, effective AI agent for you personally, Chris, than anyone, because they have such incredible data assets on you, Chris. They know you. And they're spending as much or more on AI than, anyone. It's pretty amazing. So I think, their role as an AI agent, as an operating system for life, as well as shopping, is going to certainly compete to some degree with what ChatGPT is doing. They want to be your operating system for life, and obviously play a role in commerce. And then thirdly, I just think the App Store tactically for ChatGPT is going to be interesting. You're seeing you're already kind of seeing this with Etsy, Shopify, Walmart. You could argue that's sort of part of this app ecosystem. Now they're partnering with Spotify. It's just pretty amazing. And I just think their clout and their power and the way they're raising money, it's pretty, I don't think we've ever seen anything like it. So those are just a few items that interest me, but I always go back first to upskilling, because you just have to, be hyper educated with what's happening here. Your employer expects it. And by the way, they're looking at metrics. Every one of us, and they're looking at what we call some of the leading metrics. So how often are you using Copilot and other sort of key metrics there as you're on that laptop every day.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it was probably always true that the fastest learners were the ones that were going to be ahead, but I think just the pace of change right now, it's absolutely imperative, right? So I think that's great advice, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And in general, I just appreciate all the help you've given to the Food Institute over the years here. I really appreciate you spending a little time with us here on Food for Thought Leadership, and I hope we get an opportunity to speak again soon, Barry.
Let's do it, Chris. You guys rock food and beverage. I'm glad to be a part of the ecosystem, and you're just a great partner. Let's go.